And he started talking to me about this God thing. What blew the doors open for me was because he was asking me about, my spiritual life and growing up and what I'm doing now. And I was telling him about Hawaii and he's like, is that working for you? Is that, do you have a constant contact with God? Do you have a connection? I'm like, no. And he's like, well, let's read, it's page 130. Those of us who have spent much time in the world of spiritual make-believe have eventually seen the childishness of it. Boom. That was it.
Well, hello, friends of Bill W. and other friends. You have landed on Sober Speak. My name is John M. I am an alcoholic, and we are glad you're all here, especially newcomers. Newcomers, that is, both to recovery as a whole and newcomers to this podcast. Sober Speak is a podcast about recovery centered around the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. My job here on Sober Speak is simple. My job is to provide a platform to the amazing stories of recovery all around us. Consider Sober Speak, if you will, your meeting between meetings. Please remember, we do not speak for AA or any 12-step community. We represent only ourselves. We are here to share our experience, strength, and hope with those who wish to come along for the ride. Take what you want and leave the rest at the curb for the trash man to pick up. Greetings from Studio AA deep in the heart of Texas. Little Ginge, myself, is in the house. That was the voice of Mr. Greg L. that you heard at the beginning of this here episode. And you are in for a treat. You're going to hear so much more from Greg L. in just a moment. But first things first, this here episode number 343, is made possible by Adrian, Marie, and Michelle. What, you may ask, did Adrian, Marie, and Michelle do? Well, they went to our humble little website maintained by the lovely Mrs. M. They scrolled to the bottom of the page, found the little yellow donate tab, and they made a contribution. So thank you so much, Adrian, Marie, and Michelle. This here episode is coming right out to you'ns. If you're feeling a little restless, irritable, and discontented, we are here to help you get back on the beam, and we are surely excited that you have joined us. Surely. Is it surely or surely? And does that really even make sense the way I put it in that sentence? I'm guessing not, but what the hell. All right, so before we get into Greg L., there was a passage in the big book that caught my attention. Okay, here's actually how it happened. I heard somebody talking about their imagination, and that made me think about the passage in the big book about imagination, or one of the passages. There may be more than one, but I'm going to read it to you. Somebody else may need to hear it today. So it's on page 152 of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It says, we have shown how we get out from under. You say yes. By the way, I just want everybody to know I'm reading from an actual book. I think they call this analog nowadays versus digital, like when you read from an actual book. It's a little big book, by the way, which is kind of a, what do you call that? Opposites, irony or something. I don't know, like a little big book. But anyway, let me start over here. My apologies. We have shown how we get out from under. You say, yes, I am willing, but am I to be consigned to a life where I shall be stupid, boring, and glum, like some righteous people I see? I know I must get along without liquor. How can I? Have you a sufficient substitute? And it says, yes, there is a substitute, and it is vastly more than that. It is a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. There you will find release from care, boredom, and worry. Your imagination will be fired. Life will mean something at last. The most satisfactory years of your existence lie ahead. Thus we find the fellowship, and so will you. So I thought about that in terms of the imagination. And, I don't think I think the writer, Bill, here is trying to say something different than, well, let me put it this way. I never had, I don't think, a challenge with my imagination being fired when I was drinking. In other words, I thought about the absolute worst possible thing that could happen to me. I would think about who is going to attend my funeral on a consistent basis. And by the way, there were very few people. I would think about, it was just constant worry. Now, I have a tendency to get into worry, still worry and fear. But I think what they're trying to say in the passage is that your imagination will be fired in a healthy way. Like being creative, thinking about how to help others, thinking about how I can be a good person versus that unhealthy person that I was and still can be when I'm not careful. So I think the imagination being fired, what they mean by that is the imagination being fired in a healthy way and seeing what I can pack into the stream of life. And that has definitely happened. So anyway, I was just thinking about that this week. This is Greg L. We recorded him. I say we, it was actually me, but nonetheless, there was a lot of people who put the event on, many, many volunteers. This is a wonderful event called Tri-Cities in North Texas that is held on a quarterly basis. A speaker is invited in, and they are gracious enough to let me come in there and record. And Greg L., we're calling this one, as you may have figured out from the opening clip, The World of Spiritual Make-Believe. And Greg discusses many things in this episode. One is how he had kind of a combination of sorcery and voodoo mixed in with a Christian school upbringing. And the result of all of that, his first experience getting drunk, the obsession of alcohol, his home bar. And this is probably my favorite part. You'll hear him talk about his metaphysical intervention and how that played out. You got to hear this one, but I'll give you a hint. We are all here today, all of us, including you listening, because Greg helped to save us from an asteroid slamming into the earth. So we just be grateful. Like when you're making your gratitude list today or tomorrow or whatever, go ahead and put that on the list. How Greg thought this was, we also talk about, or Greg talks about how he thought AA was a multi-level marketing scheme. I hear that one a lot. We talk about his second surrender at 5 years in sobriety and much, much more. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I present to you Mr. Greg L. Enjoy this, and we will have plenty listener feedback at the end of this episode. Bye-bye.
Hey, everybody. My name is Greg, and I'm an alcoholic. Sober since May the 9th of 2004, and that is a miracle. My home group is the Chicago group in Dallas. You're all welcome to come join us on any Wednesday night. We meet at 7 o'clock on Wednesdays, right in the heart of Dallas, right off Northwest Highway in Midway. We meet one night a week. It's a big speaker meeting, and you're all welcome to come out and see us. If you want to know why we're called the Chicago group, get with me after the meeting, and I'll kind of explain that. It's a long story. We're named after the California group in Chicago, if that makes any sense. It confuses everybody, but I love my home group. I hope you love your home group. It's where I find my friends, my fellowship, the newcomer. It's where we organize, where we do our work from there. And I also get involved in a lot of service. So I know a lot of people in this room, because I've gotten outside my home group bubble. I sobered up in a big group in Dallas, and I was kind of there in a big group for a long time. And then I kind of broke out in the service structure of Alcoholics Anonymous and started finding AA all over the Metroplex and outside, and small town AA. And all of a sudden, I'm at the Tri-City speaker meeting, and I grew up in Oak Cliff. And when I was growing up, I didn't hear any names of towns like Frisco and Prosper and Little Elm. I mean, it was way out of town. But we got here in 30 minutes. I had no idea, things. When I was a kid, that was a trek, that was a road trip, and all of a sudden Dallas is getting smaller, and then all these little outlying things. And it's really pretty cool that Alcoholics Anonymous is thriving out here, because I can tell from the energy in the room that we're okay out here. There's some good people, there's some good AAs, and people are getting sober and staying sober, and lots of different groups represented. I love having stuff like this where other groups get to come and hang out with each other. You're not in your bubble. I love the bubble, but you got to get out of it every once in a while, right? So everybody loves their bubble. And I'm really happy to be here. I'm happy to be sober. I've been thinking a lot lately about, what it takes to get sober and get honest, especially working with new guys. And the book that we read it and how it works, constitutionally incapable of being honest with yourself. I've run across a lot of people who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. They just can't get there. They can't do it. And I think I was one of those for a long time. I was perfectly capable of lying to myself, which is what that implies. When you say you're constitutionally incapable of being honest with yourself, you're perfectly capable of lying to yourself, right? And believing the lies that I tell myself, that's the rub, is that, I believe my own thoughts and my own scenarios. And it took me getting into Alcoholics Anonymous and going through this inventory process to really look and see that most of the stuff that happened in my life didn't really happen. Then it happened in a a little bit like that, but I would always add something onto it, no matter what happened, I would twist it a little bit and get the heat off of me and on somebody else, and if that involved making up something or lying about it, I could do that, and I could think about it long enough, and then I would believe it happened. And I would have a resentment at this person who didn't do anything, right? And I'll get a little bit more into that, but that's the way my mind works. That's the way this alcoholic mind works. And, it all started, when I was a kid. And I think, for whatever reason, you can have your opinion on alcoholism. Is it genetic? You're born with it. You drink yourself into it. It doesn't really matter. I fought that for the first couple of years. I was sober, trying to figure out where and when and how, and it doesn't matter. I got it. I know I got it. If you read this book and you go, that's me, then you got it too, right? But for those first years, trying to figure out, I just think I was born with it, because I can remember from my very earliest memories of not wanting to be where I was. Wherever I was, I didn't want to be there. And I would go into like fantasy world. I was one of those real kids with these vivid imagination, and I would teleport myself to somewhere else and just be happy. Right. If I was at home, I wanted to go to grandma's. If I was at grandma's, I wanted to go home. If I was at school, I wanted to, I never wanted to be where I was. So I would just check out. And I can remember, parent teacher conferences, early on, elementary school, Greg's a good student when he applies himself, but most of the time he's just not here. And I would just be zoned out, on some other planet in a spaceship or whatever I was doing when I was a kid. Right. Also, I grew up in a church environment. Grandparents went to the same church. Parents met at the church. And so I was interested in what was going on there. Right when I was a kid, Bible study and all that kind of stuff. And I was really fascinated with a lot of the miracles that happened. And I was, oh wow, all these different things. But as I got a little older, I started realizing, so well, these things aren't really happening now, right? I want to see miracles now. I want to see magic. I wanted to see all the stuff happening, and there was some things that were happening now, like, Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, there's a few things happening. But as I got older, I started questioning whether those things were real or not. Maybe I don't want to burst anybody's bubble here. I don't know. But the same people that were telling me all the stuff at church were the same people telling me about Santa Claus. And I started going, wait a minute, what are these people talking about? Right. That's just my own little alcoholic mind. Right. Basically trying to figure out a reason to do the things I wanted to do that I was told I couldn't do. And so I could justify everything now because these people had been lying to me the whole time. Right. But I was still wanting to see the miracles. Right. And, so I started, as a kid, I started looking into sorcery and voodoo and, all kinds of weird stuff. Right. And not seriously, but, TV style sorcery, voodoo. Right. And so in other words, I turned into a really weird kid, if you want to. Yeah. And if you're into sorcery and voodoo, you don't have a lot of friends, right? And the friends you do have are kind of weird. So I was in this, kind of weird little mob, right? And rocking along through elementary school, getting picked on because I'm weird. And then junior high, my parents moved me over to a little private Christian school. I grew up in, elementary was public and it was big. All of a sudden I'm in this little small private Christian school, and I was, the weird little kid. But shortly after I got there, one of the cool guys have long hair, by the way. Cool guys said, hey, we're sneaking out at lunch. We're going to go sneak over to my parents' house down the street. They're at work. We're going to hit the liquor cabinet and we're going to get back to school and nobody's going to know anything. And I was scared to death. But somehow or another, I said yes. I had never, I was scared of everything when I was a kid. I was, BMX was the thing, and I was, I'd had the bike with all the stuff on it, but I would not jump anything. I'd just watch all the other kids do it, and I'm like, I might scratch my bike. But anyway, this kid asked me to do that, and it was a couple of them, and we snuck out at lunch. We did what we said we were going to do, and all of a sudden we get over to this kid's house, and we get into that liquor cabinet, and we started taking pulls off of bottles. Don't drink too much. My dad will find out, so he'd hand me one, or hand the other guy one, and we started doing this thing. And I'd been around alcohol before. It was not foreign to me. My parents drank occasionally, and sometimes I could see them, I could see alcohol having an effect on them occasionally, but I was curious, but I had never had enough to have the effect. Well, this time I got enough to have the effect. And what happened was, all of a sudden I started getting a little bit more in control, and they started getting a little bit more out of control. And I don't know if they're alcoholics or not. I haven't followed their story from junior high on Facebook, but I've tried. But all I remember is all of a sudden I'm trying to tell them, hey, we've got to go. Hey, we're going to get caught. Hey, you guys, let's get. I was getting them out the front door. All of a sudden I was in control. I was getting them back over to school, and we had overshot the mark, right? At the little Church of Christ school, And when we walked in, we were busted, and it was obvious what we had been doing. These people don't dance, much less drink. And it was a big deal. Right. And, so we got sent to the scariest place on earth. We got sent straight to the principal's office, and we're talking, buzz cut military principal, sitting behind the desk is back when they gave licks and everything, and all of a sudden I ended up doing all the talking. The one cool guy was pleading the fifth, the other one was puking in a trash can, and it was all on me. And I really don't remember exactly what went down or exactly what I said, but I knew afterwards I was like, I wasn't scared. There was something that happened there that I wasn't scared. And I was, kind of, chest was out a little bit, and we walked out of there in big trouble and started getting little high fives in the hall from the upperclassmen, like, way to go, little dude, And all of a sudden girls started, chatting and talking to me, and, that was really daring or whatever, and I realized that I'd kind of arrived a little bit, and all of a sudden I was considered maybe one of the cool kids, maybe. But I realized after that we wanted to drink again, and we eventually got some more and did it again. And when it happened again, I felt, normal, and for whatever reason, I felt like, alcohol made me feel like everybody else always feels. And I couldn't have really articulated that at the time, but I knew I wanted more of it. When I did it, I was okay to be around you, and so the conversation at school started around, drinking, and partying. And we talked about all the things all week long. How are we going to do it? Where are we going to get it? And, as time went on, we got better and better at it, and from that point on, that was the focus of conversation. The obsession had started, and I started hanging out with other people who were also obsessed with the same thing I was, right? Probably other alcoholics, because all we wanted to talk about was drinking and partying and how do we get it and where do we get it. And, going into high school, we got pretty good at it, and it was a regular thing by this point. And I was already starting to have a problem, controlling and enjoying my drinking. Every weekend we would get access to it, and every weekend I would puke. And it was everybody knew it was going to happen. Other people didn't, but I did. And it was just like clockwork. Every Friday night and Saturday night, there was the place I went to go to puke, right? And that's where I'd be laying. And it was getting ridiculous, but but I couldn't figure out any other way to do it, right? So I started, when I got to high school, I started, there's different cliques, and everybody seems to drink, right? And you've got jocks that drink and the freaks, and there's freaks in the 70s days. That's what I was. And, so that the jocks would like drink and go do things. But the freaks would just drink and not do anything. And I liked the freaks. That was my kind of people. They smoked a lot of stuff, and it was always smoking something. And, the jocks were all healthy, and I don't know. So I became one of the freaks, and we started, and like I said, we just started hanging out. Now we started getting in trouble at school for drinking. And I remember there was one point they started searching cars for alcohol, because they were like, they're searching lockers, they're searching, who's bringing it. And we were trying to figure out, because we had to have it. A friend of mine drove an old, Dodge Duster or something. It's an old car. We were working on it one weekend. The windshield washer wasn't working, and we got to looking at it, and we said, you know what? We ran little tubes inside the car from the windshield washers, filled that thing up with vodka. So when you're driving along, you hit the windshield washers, and it would squirt vodka through the tube. And it was, you could put 2 glasses in the car, hit the windshield washers, and fill up 2 cups, and the teachers would never catch us. And it was, these things were beautiful. It was not normal, but these are the things, the lengths I was willing to go to. And so, we were getting away with it. Right. And my aspirations for life were, partying, and I started realizing I'm going to need money to do this. Right. And instead of trying to figure out, I had a job waiting for me with my dad and my grandfather, family business. It was kind of a, bird nest on the ground type of situation. I shouldn't screw this up. This is sitting there waiting for me. All I got to do is graduate from high school. That was the threshold. Right. And so this is the only reason I graduated high school, was so I could, get out, get this job, get money, and party. And that's what I proceeded to do. Got out of high school. There was this girl that had been running with me for a few years, and we decided to get married, and we set up shop and we bought a little house, and we were the first people to get a house, and it became Party House, right? It was Party Central. And it was beautiful. These are the good times. These are the days you try to recreate. This is where Bill Wilson says he's arrived. I was going to work carrying a briefcase. I thought I was somebody. I was getting paid for work that I probably wasn't doing. I was just getting off work and going home, and the party was on, and the weekends were beautiful. And the book talks about never could we recreate those great moments of the past. These were the great moments of the past that I chased for another 15 years after that, trying to get back to that perfect party, that one night when the weather was great and the right people were there, and we had the right amount of everything, which means we didn't run out, and everything was just beautiful. And I didn't ever want the party to be over either. People would be like, it's the sun's coming up and people are starting to leave. I'm like, no, stay, stay. I always wanted to, and every time I'd try to recreate that last party that was awesome, and it just kept getting sadder and sadder, really, it just never quite happened again. And this girl I was married to, started making some noises a couple of years into this marriage, going that, we party on the weekend. That's great. But it's Tuesday and there's still two guys on the couch that got here Friday. And when are they going to leave? And, the party's starting to bleed over into the week. And I'm really struggling to make it back and forth to work. And, there's things going on in the house that aren't healthy for a marriage. With all these people in the party house and all the he and she and who's with who. And I don't know. And she was said, look, we gotta slow this down. We gotta grow up, and I was like, what are you talking about? Grow up? I carry a briefcase to work. I'm grown up. Right. But she just wouldn't lay off. Right. And I'd go talk to the boys and say, hey, you gotta go home for a little while, come back in a week or so. We'll, let her calm down. And this was going back and forth for a long time. And at about 5 years of marriage, she came in one day and said, I'm out. I'm leaving. She already had her bags packed and she was walking out the front door. And I'm like, she's not serious, and she left and, a week goes by and I'm like, yeah, she'll be back any day now. Right. And another week. I'm like, she's not coming back. I was just, I was shocked. Everybody was shocked, right? All my party friends were like, oh man, she's not coming back, dude, And then all of a sudden I got wind from, through the grapevine that she was dating this guy, this acquaintance of ours that we had known. And I'm like, oh my God, she's dating this guy. And then all of a sudden my alcoholic mind kicked in. She's probably been dating him the whole time. She's been cheating on me is what she's been doing. She's been cheating on me with this guy for a long time now. And, I was just too blind to see it. I was just too in love to even notice it. Right. And so I built this resentment around my wife left me for another man. And I carried that resentment all the way into Alcoholics Anonymous. And this is, the book talks about, wrongs fancied or real, when we're doing our inventory. And this is one of these fancied resentments, kind of like I was talking to you about, being capable of lying to myself. I created this, this situation happened. It was all my fault. But instead of it being my fault, all of a sudden it's his fault. This guy who they've been cheating on me the whole time. It's her fault. And I drank at that. And that was my story at the bar. My first wife left me for another man, and that was my sob story. Right. So after she left, I tried to slow the house down a little bit, and try to get back in, and all of a sudden, it just wouldn't slow down. So the only way to get rid of a party house is to sell it. You can't slow down a party house. You just have to move. And I owe an amends to whoever bought that house. Cause, people were years later, probably still, Greg there. So I moved out of there and I moved into kind of the uptown area and got a little condo and decided I was going to be a bar drinker. Because you see, by this point, a lot of other substances have started showing up at the house. And I could say that those are the problems. Drinking's never the problem, but the other stuff, I can see that's a problem, and I could start that stuff and I could stop that stuff and go, oh, that was close, but you start talking to me about my drinking and I don't hear it. It's like, no, but you say, hey man, you need to stop that. And I'm like, hey, you're probably right. Yeah, I need to stop doing that. That's probably what is causing all these problems with this party house. I need to get away from that. I'm just going to be a bar drinker and go to the bar. Cheers was on TV at the time. And I wanted to go find my home bar, and, everybody knows my name and all that. And I found it. I was out bar shopping, kind of like you'd be like looking for a home group, see if it's, there was one bar that served a very strong drink. It seemed to have the same people in there every night, they all had their own chairs and I started, getting known there. I loved it there. Matter of fact, one day I was running late to work, which was pretty common. And I decided to stop in there and get a bite to eat. I'd never been in there in the daytime. So on the way, I just ran in. I was going to get a little sandwich, maybe a little shot, take the edge off. And I get in there and I walk up to the bar and I order a sandwich and a shot. And about that time, the mailman comes in and starts passing out the mail to the people at the bar. And I'm thinking, this is really weird, right? They're passing out mail to the people at the bar. So I leaned over to the bartender and said, hey man, what's up with the mailman? He goes, oh, well, they all had their mail forwarded. I'm like, what? He says, well, most of these people are retired. They're kind of an older crowd, right? And, doctors and lawyers or whatever that hang out at the bar every day. And they brought their bills from home. They'd all compare their bills and watch Jeopardy and play these little drinking Jeopardy games. And one day Bob over here, got tired of hauling his mail in and decided to have his mail forwarded as kind of a joke. And they all saw how well that was working. They all forwarded their mail. And I remember sitting there at that bar right in that moment thinking, this is absolute genius. This is what I want to do when I retire. I want to retire to the bar and have my mail forwarded, you know? That was my goal in life, right? And I thought I could achieve it for somehow or another, you know. So I loved that bar, hung out at that bar, you know. I'd get off work, I'd go straight over there, you know, and walk in and everybody, hey, Greg, you know, and it was great. And then, you know, but it was getting monotonous, you know. I was starting to have real problems, you know, keeping the bills paid, you know, because bars are more expensive than drinking at home. And I've got they let you have a tab at this bar too, where you could, you know, get beer on credit. You know, this is great stuff. And so, you know, I'm living at that bar, and I had every intention of, you know, not doing tonight what I did last night. You know, I'm going to go to the bar, but I'm only going to go in for couple of hours. I'm going to only have 3 or 4 drinks, whatever it was. I'm going to drive home. I'm going to do laundry, right? Because laundry's going to be a problem. You know, I'm not married anymore. You know, she's not doing the laundry. After a couple, 2 or 3 weeks, you know, it's got to get done at some point. But I'd get to the bar and I'd sit there and I'd have a couple drinks and I'd get to talking. And then I'd look down and like, oh crap, I've overshot the mark. Can't really go home. No, I can't drive in this condition. That's not safe, right? So I'd go see the guy at the end of the bar who has that other stuff who would wake me back up a little bit, right? And then I'll go home and do a lot of laundry, right? I'm just, yeah. Except I would never leave. And, and then, you know, the lights would come on and it's 4 a.m. and, you know, 6 people are coming back to my house to finish the party and it's Tuesday and, you know, it's just happening over and over and over again, you know, and like I said, I had a issue with all those other substances, but you start talking about alcohol and I got a real problem. And the longer I was at this bar, the more that other stuff started getting into the mix. And, I ended up doing something I never thought I'd do. You know, I tried another substance and everything changed. And all of a sudden I stopped going to the bar. I stopped going to work. I got rid of all my old friends. I got a whole host of new friends. We were all running the streets together. I don't know any of their names. They helped me sell all my stuff. Yeah. Yeah. And my life just went completely a total off the cliff spiral, you know. Everybody was like, what happened to Greg, you know? And it was crazy. And everybody was, praying for me, wishing I'd come back. And I remember being out there on the streets. I didn't even know I was homeless till I did a 4-step, and that's 5th step. Yeah. My sponsor was like, where were you living during this time? I'm like, well, you know, I really wasn't sleeping. So do I really need a place? You know, I'm busy, you know? And he says, that means you were homeless. I'm like, wow, I never thought about that. Yeah. All my stuff was in my car. So, but you know, it was just chaos. And I remember my prayer back then was, God, let me just get back to the bar and drink. You know, I just want to drink with my friends. You know, I wouldn't get sober. I wouldn't do anything like this. And that's where, you know, this alcoholism, you know, it's even when I'm out there doing all this other stuff, you know, alcoholism is still, you know, deep inside me, you know, calling me to come back, you know, stop this other stuff. You just need to come drink with the boys and everything's going to be fine, you know? And I'm out there running and gunning. I'm pretty much dead. Everybody knows it. I've tried, you know, different things, you know, therapists and all, you know, this little stint at rehab. I was completely dishonest with the whole thing, so nothing ever worked. But there was this one girl that I had dated periodically when I was just hanging out at the bar. Met her at the Dallas Margarita Ball. I don't know if y'all ever heard about that. Yeah, it was big. It was a big thing back in the 80s, right? And she was reading tarot cards in a room. It was kind of her side gig, right? She was like this real spiritual, metaphysical, you know, and I'm like, ooh, spiritual, metaphysical. I like it. You know, so we got together and we were hot and heavy for, you know, several weeks. And she started making noises, you know, like the first wife did. Hey, you need to slow this down. You know, stop coming to my house at 2 a.m. Can you come before the bar closes? Why do you have to stay at the bar? And so I stopped. I just kind of cut it off with her. And over the years, she had been, let's say, keeping track of me. Stalking's a bad word. She was keeping track of me a lot, right? But she was trying to help me, and she kept telling me that I was appearing over her bed at night, you know, in some etheric form, going, "Help me." me. And I'm like, wow, maybe I was doing that. I don't know. I'm way out there, right? So I'm out there on the streets. I'm dying. She invites me over for a little party. I get there. There's some other girls there. They're all into the metaphysical stuff. And it turns out to be a little intervention. Yeah. Of her own design. This is not like the one you see on TV. Yeah, they got me. They gave me lots to drink and tried to calm me down a little bit. They took me out in the backyard. They took my shirt off. They put crystals on me, and they started pulling demons out of me. And I'm laying there in the grass with my shirt off with the crystals and attractive women with crystals and thinking, this might work. Yeah, this might work. So we ended up getting married. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No. So me and her, I moved in that night because all my stuff was in my car, right? So, I didn't even have to move in. And so we started off, right? And it was, and she had a house, she had a car, she had a job. She had a little daughter who was 8 years old. She had a bottle of vodka, a bottle of Seagram 7, 2 boxes of Franzia wine in the fridge, and life was great, right? And I stopped running the streets. I stopped doing all that other stuff. I got back to just drinking, and I'm going to, all of a sudden just shifted everything, right? Back to doing what I wanted to do. Back to my, my prayers have been answered, right? And I'd found this spiritual lady who's leading me on a spiritual path, right? And we're doing all kinds of spiritual things that are just way out there, right? And, we're channeling and all these things. And it's kind of like an AA meeting, you'd have a speaker. We'd have speakers come and they'd, people would come in the audience and, they'd sit up there and then they'd, do some, and then they'd call in some sort of outer being and tell us all about what's going on in different dimensions. It was wild, and I remember after I was there for a couple months, she got a phone call. She was the internet was getting started and these people were were finding each other in chats. Different organizations were forming, I guess you could say, in the spirit world. And she got a phone call. The higher ups in this organization, she was a master teacher of, said, "Hey, we've got a problem. We've got an asteroid headed towards Earth. It hadn't been detected because it's in a different dimension, right? I see what y'all are thinking. Yeah. But the vibration of the planet is low. And if we were to raise the vibration of the planet, the vibration would deflect the asteroid and we'd be okay." And so she got off the phone and told me about it. I was like, "Well, baby, what do we got to do?" And she's like, "Well, everybody's supposed to meet in Hawaii, which is the center of the vibrational field of the planet." And I'm like, "Well, we got to go." So we borrowed whatever money we could and got on a plane and went to Hawaii and the people in the robes came out and told us what was going on. And I'm coming out of my fog from living on the streets, right? So I'm just sitting there with a coconut and some rum in it going, wow, and we had singing bowls and, man, I don't know. I really don't know what we did that whole weekend, but at the end of it, the people in the robes came out and said, "We checked this morning and we've done it. The vibration's up and the asteroid, it's swear to God." And I was like, wow, 2 months ago, I was a homeless crackhead. And today I'm in Hawaii saving the planet. It's just, so I was on a spiritual high, let's say, Oh, and so we got back home and, she got pregnant and we got married and we're rocking along and I'm just drinking, right? And I'm following her spiritual path and just drinking. I got my job back with my dad because I'm just drinking. Everybody's happy I'm just drinking. Mom and dad are, "Oh, thank God he's just drinking." Just don't, she even told my dad, "Don't you say anything if he comes into work hungover. We don't want him going out there doing that other stuff. Just let him be sick, And all my old friends were like, "Hey man, Greg's just drinking. Did you hear?" It's like, everybody's starting to come back around, but it was getting, again, it's getting monotonous, and it's, I'm trying to, envelop myself with her spiritual program, right? But it's not doing anything for me. And I can't say that to her, but I'm going around doing it. And I get that way with almost everything I've done. I have this chameleon thing that a lot of alcoholics do. I can come into your room and I can dress like you dress and I can talk like you talk, but am I getting anything out of it? I'm just pretending. I'm just, it's fantasy world. I'm good at the fantasy stuff from when I was a kid, right? And I'm interested in magic and miracles and voodoo or whatever, I'm all in, I'm all ears, right? But I'm not doing anything. I'm not feeling anything. And I'm just getting sicker and sicker. Right. And we're staying in this relationship and we're starting to argue, and it's just not doing well. And the argument starts about my drinking. She drinks, but I drink more. And here we go again, and she's threatening to leave because of my drinking. I'm trying to slow down. I'm doing everything the book's talking about. I'm just drinking wine. I'm just drinking beer. I go out and find 12% alcohol beer, and I'm going to a therapist. I'm going to doctors. I'm trying, to get on medication. I'm doing everything that, just to try to tone this down so I can drink. I don't want to not drink. The not drink never even crosses my mind. I've got to tone it down. I've got to be able to keep this thing going. I mean, if I can't drink, what am I going to do? And then the big fight happened, and she said, okay, I'm out of here. And I was like, well, wait a minute. I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit drinking. And as soon as the words came out of my mouth, this thing hit my stomach, this fear that I've never felt before in my life. I was always going to calm down, slow down, just tone it back, whatever. I never said I was going to quit. And all of a sudden I said the words, and I was like, oh my God, what have I done? I remember laying in bed that night, could not sleep, just freaking out like I've never freaked out before in my life, going, oh my God, how am I going to not drink? This has been the solution since I was in junior high, and here I am 37 years old and I've just lost the solution. Right. After a few weeks of trying to, taper off, cause I told her I quit. So I had to do something. Right. So I was sneaking little bottles of vodka around and I told her I quit, and then she busted me and she was packing the bags and she was leaving. And I got one more deal. There's these old guys that have been talking to me about A&A. Yeah. And I just said, I finally called one of those guys and I was just going to call him, have him talk to my wife and calm her down a little bit. And I said, hey man, I think I might have a problem. He goes, I'll be over in a minute, and AA drives up in the driveway 5 minutes later, and took me to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous the next day. And that was at the Cornerstone Group on a Monday night, May the 10th, actually, 2004. Didn't know what I was getting into. Didn't know what you people were up to. Did not do my homework. I knew there was 12 things, but I was trying to figure out, the rub, there's always the rub, right? You're after money or you're after my soul, one of the two, right? And I saw that circle and triangle thing. I think, oh, this is one of those pyramid things, one of them multi-level marketing deals. I'm going to have to bring 5 of my drunk friends in, and then I'll be a sponsor. Yeah. But I was sitting in the rooms and I was not drinking. And after a week or so, I'm like, wow, I haven't drank, and I kept coming back and I kept hearing a little bit here and there, and then all of a sudden the doctor's opinion was talked about, and the fog had lifted enough to where I could hear it, and talking about the allergy and the obsession, and how this is an illness. And all of a sudden this light bulb went up. I'm like, oh my God, this explains my whole life. This allergy thing, explains why I could never, drink, in moderation. I could never go out and have a couple of drinks. I would always drink until I was passed out or locked up or whatever, I could never control and enjoy my drinking. And the mental obsession was there. I could look back through my whole life and from the time I started drinking when I was in, junior high and high school, this obsession with how are we going to get it? Where are we going to get it? And all I think about was alcohol. And that followed me all the way through into, later in life, where now I've got a house and 2 kids and we're going to go to the movies on a Friday night. And my first thought, how are we going to drink? How are we going to drink at the movie? Where are we going to, am I going to have to sneak it in? What am I going to have to do? And so boom, I'm like, oh my God, I'm an alcoholic. And then I started reading ahead of your steps a little bit, started talking about God, and I'm thinking, well, I probably don't want to tell them about Hawaii and all the things, I can see how y'all might need sponsors, but I'm plugged in over here. Right. But it was about 2 months of going to meetings and not getting a sponsor and not working any steps and not drinking for the first time in my life since I was 17 years old. So I got 20 years of solid drinking here. And all of a sudden, boom, I'm not drinking and I start going crazy. My mind starts going insane. I cannot figure out what is going on with me? Why can't I be happy, sober? I'm restless. I'm irritable. I'm discontent. The book's, it's talking to me. It's telling me exactly what I am, and I just can't shake it. And then I saw somebody relapse. I'm like, I didn't know you could do that. Wow. Hey, maybe there's a little out. I could do this every once in a while, right? But luckily, before I did that, I asked a man to sponsor me, and I asked a man who was plugged into Alcoholics Anonymous, who was sponsoring other men, who was active, who knew the book. He got me in the book. We got commitments. We got call-in times. We got schedules. We got it all. And we started getting into this book, and he started talking to me about this God thing, and what blew the doors open for me was because he was asking me about my spiritual life and growing up and what I'm doing now, and I was telling him about Hawaii and he's like, is that working for you? Is that are you feeling, do you have a constant contact with God? Do you have a connection? I'm like, no. And he's like, well, let's read, it's page 130. Those of us who have spent much time in the world of spiritual make-believe have eventually seen the childishness of it. Boom. That was it. Those of us who spent much time in the world of spiritual make-believe have eventually seen the childishness of it. And that hit me. I've been in the world of spiritual make-believe my whole life. I would pretend I was here. I would pretend I was there. I pretend I was a voodoo witch doctor. I would pretend, I'm in church, I'm pretending. I'm in the metaphysical world, I'm pretending. And nothing wrong with any of these people. I mean, maybe the voodoo stuff, but nothing wrong with people at church, nothing wrong with people in the metaphysical world. And everybody, all those people are getting fed doing what they're doing. For whatever reason, I didn't get it. I couldn't get it. I've got a spiritual malady that for some reason I am blocked off from God. I don't know why. Some people are born naturally with it. Some people wake up in the morning and care about other people and naturally want to help people and just naturally do things. They're naturally good people. I'm not one of them. My first thought is me and my last thought is me. And it's always been that way. And so alcohol is the only thing that's ever touched that. And now I've got to find a solution that's not alcohol, right? I've got to find a way to live. I got to find a power greater than myself that's going to solve all my problems. And I started doing the work, and it wasn't this great, big moment of, I figured out who God was. I basically stopped thinking about all of it. I broke down my conception of God to just a imaginary friend, right? I went back to childhood, imaginary friend days, and just had a guy in my car that I talked to, right? And that's how I started. I had to drop everything I thought I knew and just roll with some simple concept. And really, it was more about the action and not what I thought. I didn't have to figure out who God was, or didn't have to understand God. I just had to start taking actions I didn't think were going to do anything. Cleaning coffee pots and setting up chairs and chairing meetings and talking to newcomers who don't want to talk to you, and giving people rides who don't smell very good, all these different things that I didn't think were going to work. And all of a sudden it started working. All of a sudden I was holding my head higher, and things were changing in my life. Things were happening in my life that I couldn't really understand, but the only way I could explain it was, I was in some sort of a flow with God. Things are being put in front of me that when I say yes, I do them, and things seem to work out around me. And the busier I got, the better my life started getting. And this continued on into later on. Now, the woman I was married to, we'll call her wife number 2, she started getting a resentment with me being in Alcoholics Anonymous, because she was doing her thing. And I'm like, hey, you can do your thing. I can do my thing. I don't see why we both can't do our thing. Right. Well, after about 5 years of trying to hold this together, she couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't do it anymore. So we ended up getting a divorce. And, before that, I was trying different things in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was trying, I was in my home group. I was great AA. I'd come walk in the door and like, I'm at my home group. I'm an hour of peace and calm, but I'd go out and I'd go home, and I was guarded about anything I'm doing, so I'm kind of on edge. I'm trying to manipulate and trying to keep everything together. And when I go to work, work's not AA, work's work, right? That's business. That has nothing to do with all these, spiritual principles and all these kind of things people are talking about in the meetings. So I'm not really doing AA at work. I'm not really doing AA at home. but then I get to AA and I'm like, blah, I can get to the meeting. I can dump out my problems at the discussion meeting, and I feel a little better about myself or whatever. And I'm going on about like 5 years into this. And then the divorce happens and then the custody battle and my whole life blows up. And people around me were like, you're going to have to trust God on this one. You're going to have to really do it. And that was the final surrender for me. When everything blew up at 5 years of sobriety and I'm like, why me, God? And that's when I dove, they talk about, you're either, walking towards a drink or walking away for a drink. And I was in Alcoholics Anonymous enough that when everything blew up, I fell into the middle of AA instead of falling out. If you're on the edge and everything blows up, you're probably out of here. But I was still plugged in enough to where I fell deeper into the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's when my life really just took off. The trajectory of my life just shot up like this. I didn't see it at the moment because everything around me was falling apart. But if you just trust God and start doing these things, everything's going to work out. I started sponsoring other men. I started going to conferences. I started getting more involved in service outside of AA, and things in my life just fell into place. I mean, it was like I wasn't even trying to do anything, which I wasn't. My hands were off of my life and my life was getting better. And for the first time, I realized that it was me that's screwing this stuff up all the time. I just need to let it go and do what I'm supposed to be doing, and it seems like the more of this kind of stuff I do, the better my life gets, and I don't have time, in my mind, I got to focus on things. If you're like buying a house or buying a car, I don't have time to go to the meeting. I got to go to 4 different car dealerships and pit them all against each other and, get online and stay up till 4 a.m. looking at prices. I don't do any of that anymore. I just go buy a car. It's a lot easier, and then go to the meeting and go help a drunk. Right. And it's how these things just kind of get put in front of me, and then I met a girl in my home group, and she was, I dated a little bit in AA, but there was this one girl who was, I asked her out and she told me that she didn't date boys from her home group. And, I respected that, found out it wasn't true, but I respected it. Yeah. But after a period of time, I asked her out again, and my wife Jenny, who's here with us tonight, and a lot of people know Jenny. I'm known around town as Jenny's husband, because together we just kind of fell more into AA, and it was kind of when you're in a relationship with somebody else who's in the program and you're both serious about it, and you both go do things, and your life revolves around it. So we've got a house full of Alcoholics Anonymous, with the phones ringing, all the time. Women take longer than men to talk. I understand how this works. I can be done in 5 minutes. She's going to be, who knows, they got to start when they wake up in the morning and get to the, yeah. But I love it, and together, we've seemed to be able to do more, and we get out and we're living this life, and everything around us seems to be falling into place. And that's really kind of what I got to say is, it's, you're trying to figure everything out. Stop, it's just there. You just sit here and do what's in front of you, and look around, look what there is to do. Look around outside of your group in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got into the area archives and it was crazy how, I was laying in bed, I believe. And Jenny was on the iPad. She goes, Frank over at the area is looking for an alternate archive chair. And I'm like, that's old stuff, right? I was kind of liking some of the old AA stuff, right? So I took that commitment and boom, Frank fell in love and moved away and said, the whole thing's yours. So I'm the area archive guy, which is the way things happen in AA. You get a commitment, you get a service commitment. You don't know anything about it, but you're surrounded by people who are going to help you. Right. And all of a sudden, I'm going around with the area archive stuff at conferences and people are asking me questions I don't know answers to, which means I got to go figure it out. And that's how you learn in Alcoholics Anonymous. And by the time you rotate out of something, you think it's yours and it's not. You hand it off to the next guy and you go on and you do something else. And it takes a lot of people to keep this precious thing that we've got going, because the world wants to come in, the world wants to change it. We found something here that really works and we've got to protect it. And so that's kind of, the more you go into sobriety, the more you start appreciating that and you start really getting serious about it and you start paying attention to what's going on in and out of the rooms with Alcoholics Anonymous name on it. And so you start trying to, help your sponsees and everybody with traditions and concepts and all these other things that you don't even really think about when you're new. But, as you go on, AA gets bigger, so you think you're going to run out of stuff and this is going to get boring. It doesn't. It's more and more and more. So I appreciate you guys asking me to come out here tonight. I really enjoyed it. I love Tri-City, anything that gets AA together and we can all be in one room and fellowship. So thanks a lot.
Once again, thank you to Mr. Greg L. For letting us come in there and record him. And thanks to the Tri-Cities group for letting me come in there and record him. And remember, folks, we do not want you sharing your toothbrush. We don't want you sharing your STD, but we would love for you to pause your device and share Greg's episode with another friend or family member. It may be just what they need today. Now, on to a little bit of listener feedback. The first thing we have here is an email from Rusty R. Now, just so you know how this works is, our good friend of the program, Mr. Mike, monitors some emails that come in from the prison system, and he communicates back and forth with Mr. Rusty. And here is a message that he got from Rusty saying, "Hey, Mike," on the front end of this one, "pray all is going well with you, freedom, and continuing sobriety. I'm mentally preparing myself for the next 5 months of misery as I endure day-to-day nonstop baking inside of a hot Texas prison. I truly loathe this part of the year. Alas, I make it through one day at a time. Smiley face." And he says, "Would you be so kind, Mike, as to forward a message to John M." Here it goes. First thing before I go on, thanks, Rusty, for writing in. We're with you here, brother. We're with you. And I'm so glad that this silly little podcast of mine can provide some respite from the days there inside the Texas prison. Anyway, Rusty goes on. "Well, hello, little G, John M." 4 exclamation points. He's calling me Little G. Anyway, he says, "I truly enjoyed episodes number 339, Joe Hawk, and 340, Deb H. Part 1. And I can't wait for Part 2 from Deb H. She is a gem." Well, you're right. She is a gem, and I'm glad you enjoyed those episodes. Her beginnings way back yonder in the day mirror a lot of my own. Please let her know that those in recovery and incarcerated gain a lot from what she shared. Well, I did let her know that for you, Rusty. I did let her know. At the beginning of both episodes, you share that your personal struggles with life and working your program. For members in recovery, more so those still incarcerated, those types of shares coming from you also exhibit experience, strength, and hope. I just wanted to assure you that when you expose yourself inside of these podcasts, it exhibits honesty in big capital letters. He says, "Have you ever stopped to wonder why Dr. Bob and Bill W. emphasize that word 3 times to us alkies inside the first paragraph of How It Works?" Chapter 5, Big Book edition, Big Book, 4th edition. "I've thought it to be a counterbalance to the insanities described within Chapter 3, the first 3 paragraphs. I think you're right about that, Rusty. I think you are correct about that." And then he says, "In closing, I am truly jealous that your daughter blessed you with such a cool nickname." I only get the generic quote, "Dad," from my princess. Thus was my reason for shortening your nickname to Little G. I hope she approved. Well, I ran it by her and she does approve. And then he says, until next time, hasta la vista with 3 exclamation points. Well, just in case you don't know what's going on there, maybe you're a first time listener or you don't pay attention to what I say most of the time, which I can't blame people. My daughter one day came up with a rapper name for me, and that rapper name is Lil Ginge. But and I kind of like this here. What Rusty has done is taken Little Ginge and shortened it to Little G. So thank you, Rusty, and I hope that your princess is able to listen to this podcast. And little princess, if you're listening, we love your dad, and I'm so glad that you wrote in, Rusty. I really am. John writes in. And John said, not me, John, another John. It says, hello, John M. I am from a small town, Dorchester, but I currently reside in London, Ontario. I've been there. He says, my sobriety date is May 25th of 2020, and I am a member of the Riverside Men's Group in London, Ontario. I found your podcast by looking for some speaker tapes of Marty C. from Hamilton, Ontario. Yes, by the way, I've been to many meetings up there in Ontario. In fact, I used to walk into the meetings and they go, there's Texas. Well, they didn't say it like that. They said, hey. I've lost my Canadian accent. Hey, hoser, there's Texas. They would call me Texas when I walked in the rooms. But nonetheless, he says, I am quite fond of Marty C. and the way he practices the principles. Thank you for your service to AA. I think your format is one of the best I have found online. Happy 24 hours. Warm regards, Jonathan P. Well, thank you, John. I shortened your name to John there. My apologies. But anyway, I'm glad you wrote in, and I passed your message on to Marty C. By the way, if you're listening in once again for the first time, and you're thinking, well, how can I write an email to you, Mr. John M.? Well, we have a method for that. You write me at John, JOHN, at soberspeak.com, and I would love to hear from you. I especially like hearing about any of the speakers and guests that we have had on here, and I also like hearing about other people who have been like Eskimos is what they call it, or people who have been influential in your life and in your sobriety. And you want to talk about them and give them a little love. Let people hear about them on the internet radio, on a podcast, right? And you just want to brag on somebody. I would love to hear from you about that as well. Debbie writes in, and Debbie says, in fact, her subject line is Deb H., who Rusty was just talking about just a moment ago. She says, hi, John. I just finished listening to part 1 of Deb H's talk. I had the opportunity to meet Deb a few years back in Ottawa, Canada. We're back to Canada again. And I remember her well. She definitely touched my heart. I am looking forward to part 2 of her talk. Also, John, thank you for being so transparent with what you have been going through. I know from experience how difficult it can be to be open and vulnerable, and even more so for this alcoholic. Best regards, Debbie W. in Ottawa, Canada, sent from my iPhone. So if you know a Debbie in Ottawa, Canada that has an iPhone, I just broke her anonymity. You'll just have to start asking all the people named Debbie with an iPhone if that was the one they were talking about. But thank you, Debbie. I appreciate you. God bless you. I try to be as vulnerable as I possibly can. I know I'm not the only one going through difficulties, as I always talk about, and hoping that it helps somebody somewhere along the road. And by the way, I did pass your message on to Deb H, and she was very appreciative. All right, everybody, there is another episode of Sober Speak in the books. Keep coming back. It works if you work it. I always pause at this point and say, what do I say when I end the, the part from the big book. May God bless you and keep you until then. I take this 1 week at a time. I hope to be back next week and love you guys. Have a good one. Bye.